this government does not think that there is a problem. They keep talking about being on top of the situation, when by the day, people are being killed, when by the day, people are being abducted, when by the day, our critical infrastructures are being vandalized. And oil bunkering now has become a regular occurrence, especially in the South-South. I mean, it's a worrisome situation, and like I said, every responsible government must be very, very worried. But if you look at the way the government carries on, there doesn't appear to be any indication that they're worried that we're moving towards a disintegration. So the collapse of this government. We're literally like a banana republic now, when anything can happen to anybody at any time, anywhere.
Bill Gates, an American business magnate, software developer, investor, author, and philanthropist. He is a co-founder of Microsoft. He once said, "It is fine to celebrate success, but it is more important to heed the lessons of failure." I quite agree. Now let's see how this relates to what we will be discussing tonight. Warm greetings and welcome to The Conversation. We are reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Annabelle Oji. Now, the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja acquitted Senator Abba Moro, a former Interior Minister, on charges of procurement fraud in respect to the 2014 botched Nigeria Immigration Service recruitment. The court, however, convicted a former permanent secretary of the ministry, Anastasia Daniel-Nwobia, of complacency in the 2014 botched failed exercise. Mrs. Daniel-Nwobia was prosecuted alongside Mr. Moro, a serving senator, and others in relation to the recruitment which led to the death of 15 people. Now, delivering judgment, the judge, Nnamdi Dimba, found her guilty of count 4 of the charges and convicted her accordingly. In the said count 4, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, alleged the award of contract for only online recruitment into the NRS without seeking approval of the Bureau for Public Procurement, that's BPP. Now, this, according to the charge, is contrary to Section 40 of the Public Procurement Act number 65 of 2007 and punishable under Section 58 of the same act. It was reported that Senator Abba Moro supervised the deadly immigration recruitment exercise that led to the death of at least 15 young Nigerians. The applicants died in stampede caused by the poor organization of the recruitment test in Abuja and other cities. EFCC later charged Mr. Moro with 11 charges of abuse of office, false pretense, procurement fraud, and money laundering. The defendant allegedly defrauded 675,675 applicants of 675,675,000, with each of the applicants made to pay 1,000 naira to access an e-portal to apply for the immigration job. So, our guest on the show today is Senator Patrick Abba Moro, a politician and former Honorable Minister of the Federal Ministry of Interior. He is currently the Pro-Chancellor and Chairman Governing Council of the University of Agriculture there in Makurdi. In 2019, he was elected into the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, replacing Senator David Mark, a two-term Senate President, that's in the 6th and the 7th Assembly, and one of the longest-serving senators in Nigeria. So we will be speaking to Senator Abba Moro there in his Abuja office to get a glimpse on all that transpired during the Nigeria Immigration Service recruitment test, causes of Nigeria's internal security breaches, the state of Nigeria's correctional centers then and now, and the Benue State Politics come 2023. We've got that and plenty more still ahead. So fasten your seatbelt tonight, because the conversation has just got started. I will see you on the other side. welcome back. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from Captain's Television here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Now we have our guest. He is distinguished Senator Abba Moro. He is a politician. He is the former minister, the Federal Ministry of Interior. You're welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you. All right, now let's start by scratching the surface. As a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, what are your reactions to all of these challenges bedeviling the country?
Well, the challenges confronting this country in all its ramifications are very disturbing. Very disturbing in the sense that you expect that as nations grapple with challenges of nation building, the myriad of problems are supposed to abate. Unfortunately, in the Nigerian situation, we appear to be steering the storm rather than mustering the necessary political will to tackle the challenges headlong. Look at the pandemic of corruption. Look at the hydra-headed challenges of insecurity in this country. If you look at the challenges of infrastructural deficit and decay, the poverty level that we have in this country now, increasing by the day. If you look at unemployment rate in the country, these are basically challenges that confront nations that are not usually peculiar to Nigeria. But what is peculiar to Nigeria in the circumstances is our inability to tackle the problems headlong, not even one. And like I said, the challenges continue to exacerbate by the day. If you take the challenge of insecurity, for instance,
Okay.
in the time past, we were talking about the challenges of Boko Haram insurgency in the Northeast. Today, Boko Haram has metamorphosed into ISWAP, into ISIS, assuming a completely international dimension. And then to think about it, you now have kidnapping, you now have armed banditry, all over the place abductions. You now have the challenge on the increase of bombings that had literally been nipped in the bud in the past. And so generally, therefore, for any responsible Nigerian citizen, not the least the lawmaker in the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, these are worrisome signs that has the implication of driving this nation to the precipice of disintegration. And we should all be worried about it. I am worried.
So I hear you say that we keep stirring the storm instead of bringing up political. There's no political will to stop or forestall all of this crisis. So who exactly is hampering the effort of the other person here?
But you must know it's the responsibility of the government, for instance, to tackle these problems. These problems that I'm talking about are national problems. They constitute the basic responsibility of government. And so, if we're talking about steering the storm or lacking the political will to confront these problems headlong, we're talking about government in the first place. And so, one of the fundamental requirements of government is the security of lives and property. And today, you will agree with me that no Nigerian can sleep with two eyes closed. People are abducted from their rooms, from their homes. People are abducted on the roads, on their travels. Children are abducted with careless abandon from their schools. And the worst of it is that when you're talking about steering the storm, for instance, one of the cardinal best practices the world over about kidnappings and ransom is that no responsible government pays ransom to kidnappers, to abductors. You don't do that. Because as it is, they have graduated into a system, a hydra-headed system, that they now even ask for arms as ransom. They ask for money that they plow back into their system. Now they are asking for arms because they have been encouraged, they have been emboldened by government that is patronizing them, paying ransom. And I remember very, very, very vividly, as Minister of Interior in the last government of President Goodluck Jonathan, would never acceded to the demand of these bandits and kidnappers to pay ransom. Never. We never did.
Okay.
It's never done anywhere in the world. But this is what they're doing. And so today, they keep picking up children, abduct children from schools in Kaduna. You go and pay them ransom. And it's a whole chain of people, of these bandits. They're not different from the ones that are operating in Zamfara. They're not different from the ones operating in Katsina and Kaduna and the rest of them. And so when you pay ransom here, they plow back the ransom into purchase of sophisticated weapons, weapons that are more sophisticated than even weapons owned by the government and distributed to our security agents. And so it's a basic deficiency in this government, and that is why these things happen by the day. Up to this moment, some of the students that have been abducted are still being held in captivity. And the worst of it is that this government does not think that there is a problem. They keep talking about being on top of the situation, when by the day, people are being killed, when by the day, people are being abducted, when by the day, our critical infrastructures are being vandalized. And oil bunkering now has become a regular occurrence, especially in the South-South. I mean, it's a worrisome situation, and like I said, every responsible government must be very, very worried. But if you look at the way the government carries on, there doesn't appear to be any indication that they are worried that we are moving towards a disintegration or a collapse of this government. We're literally like a banana republic now, when anything can happen to anybody at any time, anywhere.
It is quite sad. Now, you talked about when you were the Minister of Interior, and we remember back in 2011 where you directed the campaign for Senator David Mark, and then that's when you were appointed as the Minister of Interior by the then President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. And then you have this government, people or the handlers of the present government, they keep talking about how much insecurity have worsened, that we keep seeing all of this burgeoning state of insecurity, which is far worse than what we had in previous government. So that's what they always keep saying, that at least now you don't have to worry about dropping bags of bomb and all of that. But then people keep asking, is it worse than what you had before? But they say it is better. What they have now is better with all of this, and they spend more with regards to security apparatus, with regards to equipment and training personnel. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is the problem that I have just identified now. There is this common saying that a problem identified is a problem half solved. This government does not think that there is a problem. And that is where we are now. I can tell you with confidence that, yes, we had spits of bombings here and there during Jonathan's administration. That was the beginning of the insurgency. But I can also tell you without any fear of contradiction that towards the end of Jonathan's era, this spate of bombings and attacks had reduced. I can tell you with some level of exactitude that they had reduced. So, when you come now and claim that we don't have a daily dropping of bombs, which has been replaced by daily kidnapping of persons, which has been also replaced with daily abduction of students and groups of people. What are we talking about here? Is it a reduction or an increase? Because we are talking about insecurity in a different ramification. This is what we didn't have. I don't know when last you heard about armed robbery until recently. Because people are now taking arms to extort money from people on the roads. It didn't happen during the Jonathan era, for instance. Armed robbery had completely been eradicated. But I'm saying, therefore, and Nigerians are watching it, that insecurity in all its ramifications have become the order of the day. That right in front of the president in his hometown, for instance, even as enamored with security gadgets and rest of them as can be, people have been abducted and killed by the day. Look at the pathetic situation in Zamfara, for instance. And Kaduna. Kaduna has become a theater of literal war now between the bandits. And there is literally no proactive action that people are taking. This is a situation where things like this in horrendous manners happen. And the people at the seat of government here care less. I do remember that when there was bombing in Nyanya, for instance, at the motor park, in less than 1 hour I was there, at the risk of my life. Because of course, as a public servant in charge of internal security, it was my responsibility to adequately assess the situation and report back to my principal. But guess what? Before I knew it, Mr. President was already there. And various levels of government institutions got involved. In Madala here, when there was bombing, before you knew it, I was also there. And before you knew it, other ministers were there. When the United Nations headquarters was bombed, I was there immediately to direct activities of rescue. But you don't have it these days. Nobody cares. It becomes just another occurrence. It's not just done that way. Recently, you saw on the television the president of Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, leading the war himself. And it encourages the citizens to also get committed to fighting the war to save the country. And so some of these things that we do are not necessarily antidotes to situations of challenge or insecurity, but at least they help to encourage people. If the government cares, then all of us care.
All right then. So now this Ninth Senate have been accused of not doing much to rescue Nigeria from the challenges that are ravaging the country. Now, in fact, so many times they've been accused of being rubber stamped, and then some people have even accused them of being an extension of the president's office. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree?
Well, I sometimes it amuses me how Nigerians react to situations. When you call the National Assembly, for instance, a rubber stamp, you're just saying that we do the biddings, the National Assembly does the biddings of the executive all the times. Granted, yes, that the ruling government at the center has majority of senators and members of the House of Representatives. And there is usually some tendency towards acceding to the requests of executive arm of government all the time. But that doesn't make the National Assembly a rubber stamp. The beauty of democracy is disagreeing to agree. The beauty of democracy is when bipartisanship that warrants people to look at issues on the basis of national interest becomes the order of the day rather than the exception. But of course, in a patently partisan situation like Nigeria, in a fragile democracy, there is this tendency towards the winner takes all, which makes it obvious that the government that has the majority of the people in the parliament always have their way. But that has not stopped the opposition, for instance, from having their say. Okay? And I can tell you that in exceptional circumstances, in recent times, for instance, the Senate and the House of Representatives have come out to say, hey, we can do this. That, for instance, when we passed the Electoral Act recently, the president objected to certain aspects of the Electoral Act and transmitted a letter requesting for the elimination of certain aspects. And the Senate, National Assembly looked at it and said, hey, this is a legislation that has been thought through by 109 senators and 360 members of the House of Representatives, representing over 200 million Nigerians. We couldn't have been wrong in articulating this legislation. And then a few persons handpicked by the president advising him were right. And what did the National Assembly do? We rejected the proposal. And so the Electoral Act stays. And the Electoral Act, for instance, that has far-reaching consequences for the development and evolution of our democracy in this country, with salient provisions that has taken care of the fears of Nigerians when it comes to enthroning a transparent and credible political process, election process. And so I don't want to think that the Ninth Senate is a rubber stamp, but I agree with you that on a few occasions, on some occasions, because of their majority and because of the partisanship of our political parties and members of the political parties and legislators, we have acceded to certain things that some Nigerians feel we shouldn't have acceded to. But again, like I said, democracy is about numbers. Mm-hmm. So if the party in power has the numbers and they are able to cajole their members into believing that what has been proposed from the executive is the right thing, there is hardly anything that the opposition can do except to have their say.
All right, then, let's divert a little bit and talk about the state of our correctional centers, and which was formerly known as Nigerian Prison Service. Just as the name infers, they're supposed to be a correctional center or a place for rehabilitation. But these days, let's start by getting your thoughts. These days, our correctional centers, do they actually depict that name that they carry?
Well, first of all, I'm not an advocate of the name Correctional Center as it is in Nigeria today. The prison is not a correctional center as such. The prison is for the rehabilitation of inmates, of meting out appropriate punishment for inmates. A correctional center, in its true sense of it, are centers within the prison where people who have been convicted and serving sentences are trained to live their lives after serving their terms. Okay. And so when you generalize and say the prison in Ikoyi is a correctional center, the prison in Abuja, Kuje is a correctional center, it's a misplacement of terms. Okay. You know, because I know that as Minister of Interior then, I had gone to Durban in South Africa to understudy with some officials of the prison service here, to understudy the correctional services of some prisons in South Africa. And they are spread across some prisons, not all the prisons. And so when I came back to Nigeria, I made a proposal for the establishment of 6 correctional centers in the 6 geopolitical zones. Okay. Because the practice the world over is to be able, when you have convicted persons, to be able to train them, to be able to assist them to learn trades, so that they can conveniently fit into the society, reintegrate into the society, and carry out their trades and live their normal lives. As at the time I left the Ministry of Interior, there were several of our prisoners that were undertaking studies in various universities, especially the Open University. One of them had a first class.
Okay.
And several of them undergoing secondary school education in various institutions. But unfortunately, we were not able to create the 6 correctional centers that I proposed before we left office. And that is part of the problems that we have in this country, that we have policy somersault most of the time because a succeeding government thinks that whatever the other government had done or proposed, because it's not a creation of the existing government, was not good enough. And so they change the policy, and then you find some inconsistency in our application of the rules to better the lot of our people. And so today, I'm afraid that the so-called correctional centers that we have in the country now are definitely not living up to expectation. Because as of today, I can't find an integrated policy that has been deliberately conceived and churned out for the rehabilitation and reintegration of our prisoners or inmates of the prisons. The problem is further compounded by the enormous number of awaiting trial inmates rather than convicts.
Okay.
And generally, to the outside world, many people misrepresent what corrections or corrections that can be introduced into the system, because it's not every prisoner that should have access to these correctional services. An awaiting trial inmate, for instance, doesn't qualify for it, because as at that time, he had not been convicted, so he's presumed innocent. And so what are you going to correct? The idea of correctional services is that when somebody has been convicted of a crime, you now say, okay, we want to orientate you so that when you go outside, you do not commit the same crime again. But an awaiting trial inmate does not qualify for that. And that is why there is some level of anachronism in terms when you talk about correctional services as the name for our prisons. You know, because you are thinking or you are assuming that everybody there is a candidate for correction. It's not true. But unfortunately, too, you find that we have so many prisoners that are there today that ordinarily shouldn't be there. And because our justice system is such a gradual process, they are there sometimes even beyond the terms that the offenses that they are presumed to have committed, if they were convicted, would have served out. Somebody, for instance, commits an offense that will take him 2 years if convicted to serve his term and go. For the past 5 years, he's been there. This is not justice.
Okay.
And I can tell you very vividly the story of a young man that I met in Calabar prison. What attracted me to him was his age, or what I assumed was his age. He looked very young and was there. And then I asked him of his age. Of course, I was told that the officials of the prison service would compel them to declare ages that were not their real ages, so that they can have reason to keep them there. They must be above 18. But he told me his age, and I said, why are you here? I said, well, that there is a problem, that one day he lost his father, and he was tending to his father's farm, and one day he was returning from the farm after the farm work, and some security agents accosted him on the way because they were on their way to where a pipeline had been vandalized. And because he was coming from that direction, they felt he must be responsible for the vandalization. And pronto, they took him to the prisons. The boy had some luck because the following day when I was returning to Abuja, I did not just travel with the chief judge of the state. I sat on the same line of seats with her. And by the time we started exchanging pleasantries and introductions, it occurred to me that I should ask her. And I said, look, madam, why are people like this? When last did you go to Calabar prison for visitation? Because the common practice that chief judges of states go to prisons, listen to stories of prisoners, and where they have genuine cases, they normally freed them.
Okay.
And so when she told me, I narrated the story of this young man to her. And 2 weeks later, she called me to say that what I said was correct, that she had gone on a visitation and discovered the young man there, and that he was innocently, irregularly brought to that place, and that having listened to her and weighing the circumstances of the matter, that he had freed the man, the young boy. And so these are some of the things that occur in our prison system. Sometimes the prisons are overwhelmed by the circumstances. One, the number of prison officials grossly inadequate compared to the international best practice of a number of prisoners to a prison official. We don't have that number. And then our justice system, like I said, at a point we contemplated creating special courts for these awaiting trial inmates. Unfortunately, governments in and out continue to domicile some funds in the Ministry of Justice for the purpose of accelerating the dispensation of justice. It doesn't come true. And so we have this myriad of problems that at face value, you can quickly say that the prison service or the correctional service, as it were, are not discharging their duties as they should.
All right, we are due for a break now, but before we go on that break, I'd like to get your thought on this incessant attacks on the prison service or the correctional service, the arson, the jailbreaks. What exactly is responsible? Is it the matter of the continuous increase in prison inmates, or the continuous increase in their delay in their trial? Does it have anything to do with that? Very quickly before we go on this break.
Yeah, sometimes it is the reason of delay in their trials. Frustrations give rise to the riots in the prisons. But more often than not, the reasons are simply that criminals out there who have their colleagues imprisoned attack the prisons to free their colleagues from the prisons. But of course, congestion is partly responsible for the incessant breaks in our prisons.
All right, now let's go on this quick break, and when we return, we'll continue with this conversation with Senator Abba Moro. Don't blow my soul. We'll be right back.
Frankly, without prejudice to the people who lost their lives, there was nothing abnormal in what the Minister of Interior did as at the time, because up to this moment, for you to access the portal for JAMB, you pay a technology fee up to this moment. Ditto WAEC and the rest of these institutions. And so when this thing happened, as you characterize it, it was a national tragedy.
Welcome back. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from Captain's Television here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you just joined us, you missed quite a lot. So we're still talking to Senator Abba Moro. He is a politician. He was the former federal minister in the Federal Ministry of Interior. Now, before we went on that break, we said quite a lot of things, but then let's take a journey down memory lane. In 2014, during the Nigerian Immigration Service recruitment exercise under your watch when you were the Minister of Interior. Now, looking at all that transpired at the time, the stampedes, the deaths that were recorded, the fatalities, the national tragedy, let's hear straight from you. What exactly transpired, and what are your thoughts on all that transpired during that event?
Well, one of the lowest points of my public career had been the 2014 immigration tragedy, where 15 people died and several others were injured. A very sad commentary on the employment situation in our country. A very sad commentary on the lackadaisical approach to public service by our people. Each time I reflect on the tragedy of March 15, 2014, I feel very, very sad. But having said that, what actually transpired was the fact that at the time that we were talking, at the time that we were embarking on that exercise, a lot of things were going wrong in the country. A lot of things, especially corruption, that as with other security agencies, the Nigerian Immigration Service required more hands. And with the insurgency in the country at the time, there was an imperative need for us to engage many hands, especially as we were establishing the border patrol management sector of the Nigerian Immigration Service. As at the time, we had over 1,497, I still remember very vividly, 1,497 irregular routes into Nigeria. As at the time, we had about 886 confirmed official routes. And we didn't have the personnel to man all these routes. And so smuggling and illegal entry into the country were very, very rampant. And as at the time, there were confirmed incidents of foreigners arrested as members of the Boko Haram set.
Okay.
Which meant infiltration of the country through especially the illegal borders of foreigners who had become like mercenaries in the insurgency that was bedeviling the country as at the time. And so when we got a waiver to recruit about 4,556 officers of the Nigerian Immigration Service of all levels, of all ranks, we embarked as usual on the recruitment exercise. In the process, there were accusations of job racketeering, accusations of extortion of money, accusations of nepotism, accusations of lack of transparency in the process. As a matter of fact, when the exercise was going on, I was out of the country. It was a result of these accusations that I cut short my stay overseas to return to Nigeria. And because I got first-hand information and report about what happened, especially against the backdrop of the fact that two members of the board who were supposed to be members of the recruitment team had withdrawn their services on account of the obvious corruption that was going on there. And incidentally, the exercise was taken up in the DSS primary school in Asokoro. And so I canceled the exercise and requested that a more credible procedure was adopted. And one of it was for us to detach applicants from the process and the individuals involved in the immigration service. And so that prompted our desire to engage the services of an outside consultant, which organization was charged with the responsibility of screening and selecting persons to actually participate in the physical and written examinations of the exercise. Unfortunately, though, that wasn't done very strictly. And so we had very large numbers of persons in all the centers. But before then, we had envisaged the turnout of many Nigerians, given the unemployment situation at the time. The turnout of very many Nigerians for the exercise. And don't forget that Nigerians have this penchant of thinking that certain organizations are better in terms of employment than others. Because even at the National Stadium here, when there was stampede, identity cards of staff of INEC were found on the floor there, meaning that staff of INEC found the immigration service a more lucrative employment than INEC, and therefore wanted to try their luck, even when they may not have been part of the people that have been shortlisted for the exercise.
Okay.
And so generally, we had large turnouts of Nigerians, both invited and uninvited. These circumstances were unforeseen. And so in the process, as nature will have it, in some centers of the exercise, management of the gates became also a problem. For instance, out of the 13 or 14 gates at the National Stadium here, only 8 were opened. And because of the level of impatience and the desire to enter the place as quickly as possible to be administered with the question papers and the rest of them and the physical examinations, there was stampede at the National Stadium here. And a few persons died. A few persons died in Mina. A few persons died in Benin and Porakot, making the total number 15. But the major problem actually was what we knew later to be some level of sabotage by the leadership of Nigerian Immigration Service. And as I was later made to understand, the removal of the Nigerian Immigration Service from conducting the selection of people for the examination didn't go down well with the Nigerian Immigration Service.
Okay.
Because as we later learned, it is that process that they seize to extort money from applicants who would desire ordinarily to make the list.
Okay, so sorry to cut in here now. So now you have about 6.5 million people who registered across the country who registered to be part of that exercise. And then even up till now, a lot of people have not been able to understand the rationale behind them paying 1,000 naira. That's for some people, that was the least, for paying 1,000 naira before they could participate in that exercise. So would like you to, I'm going to ask you 2 questions and I'd like you to take them in one breath. Now that's one on the side. We'd like to understand what exactly was the rationale behind people, unemployed citizens who were looking for a job. Why do they have to pay 1,000 naira to get that job? And that's one on the side. And then secondly, there was supposed to be some kind of empathy or compensation for families of directly or indirectly to families of those that were affected. So was that done? And who were able to benefit from such? Were there any kind of refunds or something?
It's unfortunate that even at this stage, you are still referring to the payment of 1,000 naira to get a job. Nobody paid 1,000 naira to get a job. What was approved for the consultant to do was to hoist a portal, a technology portal, to enable applicants access the application form. What 1,000 was meant for was technology fee to access the portal. And technology fee is what JAMB charges when you apply for JAMB, for instance. It's what WAEC charges. It's what all other institutions that don't have yearly or budgetary provisions to conduct such exercises, that's what they charge. And so it is not 1,000 naira for job. And before we did that, it was not even arbitrary. We had to write to the Federal Character Commission to find out from them, informing them that we wanted to introduce this. And if we're introducing this, what do we do? Because in all employment situations, the Federal Character Commission comes in to advise on the process. And as a result of that, we had a meeting with the Federal Character Commission. Federal Character Commission wrote to inform the ministry in their words that what we were trying to introduce was a fantastic practice. But that in the circumstances, if we had to charge for scratch cards for accessing the portal, that it should not be more than 1,000 naira, that is the normal fee for accessing technology portal. That was what happened. And the people who applied for this exercise were not up to even 1 million, not to talk about 6 million. The applications that we had at that time initially was 700,000 people that accessed the portal to apply. At the end of the day, the people who were eventually available for shortlisting and the rest of them was 775,000.
Across the country?
Yes.
Including the FCT?
Yes. That was what happened. That was what happened. And so, I think there is a misrepresentation, a misconception of the whole practice. And quite frankly, without prejudice to the people who lost their lives, there was nothing abnormal in what the Minister of Interior did as at the time. Because up to this moment, for you to access the portal for JAMB, you pay a technology fee up to this moment. Ditto, WAEC, and the rest of these institutions. And so, when this thing happened, as you characterize it, it was a national tragedy. And based on recommendations that were made, observations that were made, the federal government arranged for a package to ameliorate the grief of persons that were involved. And so, for every family that lost a member, 3 persons, one of whom must be a lady, were given automatic employment in the immigration service. For everybody that was injured in the process, he was given employment automatically. In addition, for families that lost their members, each family was given a financial assistance of 5 million naira each. That was what happened. Unfortunately, again, when the exercise was supposed to be consummated, the then Controller General of the Nigerian Immigration Service faltered because he was not happy at being issue with the whole exercise and the rest of them. He tried to frustrate the exercise. That was what led to his suspension and eventual retirement from the service.
Okay, now, so with this burgeoning state of insecurity, back then it was about 26%, and right now we are talking about 33.5 or even more, and then youth unemployment above 40%. So it means that it keeps increasing with the population. So now with all of this increase in the unemployment state, it means that more people, in a recruitment center that calls for people, you have this kind of surge of people coming in. Have we been able to learn our lessons? Because even after the immigration recruitment, we still have other recruitments which almost fell in the same state. So have we been able to learn our lessons, draw lessons from what happened during the exercise?
I'm afraid we have not been able to do that as a nation, because the only lesson that I think was learned, which has led to a reversal of some of the practices, was the fact that there was need to start providing for recruitments of that nature in our national budgets, so that this misrepresentation of you pay for employment and the rest of them does not occur again. But outside that, basically nothing has been done. Because one of the lessons that was lost on Nigerians and the government of Nigeria at the time was the fact that for a job of 4,556, over 600,000 turned up. And that should show the level of desperation of Nigerians to get employed. That should show the volume of Nigerians that are available for employment. And as a nation, thereafter, some lessons should have been drawn to find ways of engaging Nigerians in productive employments. But unfortunately, that hasn't been done. What we have in Nigeria now is the trader money, market money, and the rest of them. Throwing money at people without any corresponding orientation towards even engaging themselves in productive activities. And so I think generally, therefore, that not too much lesson was learned by government from the 2014 immigration tragedy.
All right, so before we leave this recruitment exercise. Recently, you were discharged and acquitted of all the charges by a federal high court here in Abuja. However, the court actually convicted the former permanent secretary of the ministry, that's Anastasia Daniel-Nwobia, of complacency in the 2014 botched field exercise, and then 2 other people that were jailed. So what exactly was your grace here?
What exactly what?
Was the grace that helped you?
Well, the grace that helped me was that I was innocent of the charges. They talked about money laundering. They talked of abuse of official position, authority. They talked about embezzlement. And at the end of the day, none of the monies talked about, especially the accruals of 1,000 naira, none of this found any way to me. I never had anything with it to do with it. From the records of all the banks that were brought in as witnesses, I didn't have any hand in the collection of the money or utilization of the money.
Right.
And as a non-member of the Ministerial Tenders Board, I didn't have any role to play in the whole recruitment exercise. And there was no indication at the time that I interfered in the process. And so there was no case of abuse of office, for instance. Generally, therefore, I think that I kept praying, asking God to vindicate me at every stage of the way. Because Nigerians have this attitude of generating crimes and placing it on the head of individuals and innocent people. I genuinely directed that we embarked on that process of digitization of our recruitment, not just in the immigration service, but in all the services of the Ministry of Interior, to enthrone some level of cost effectiveness and transparency. In all my life, from being local government chairman to being minister, and currently as senator, money has never been my prime consideration. As a matter of fact, I've always felt okay with my allowances and salaries, because I entered politics in the first place from my teaching job to make a difference, to impact on the life of the people. Monetary consideration has never been my priority.
All right, since you talked about politics, now let's divert and talk about politics, especially Benue politics and power shift. Now, you once stated that there's a need for power shift from the Tiv tribe to the Idoma tribe. So at the moment, are there deliberate steps taken to achieve that feat after 47 years, where you have these complaints of unequal distribution of power in the Benue State?
Well, if you will recall, in 2021, at the Congress of the People's Democratic Party, the State Congress of the People's Democratic Party, I fired the first shot, requesting for the support of our Tiv brothers and sisters to produce the next governor of Benue State. And at that point, I made it very clear that I was coming that early, so that I put it on the table before our Tiv brothers and sisters as something to consider. And since then, I have been a very strong advocate of power shift, even though I'm aware that power is not given. And quite frankly, what is happening in Benue State is not a fair representation of democracy. But be that as it may, we have continued to advocate for a governor of Benue State of the Zonsi extraction. We've not had any very positive responses from our brothers in Benue State. But we will continue to push. We will continue to push because at a certain point, there was this insinuation or indication that the Tiv brothers, the Tiv people have 5 kindreds, and that unless each one of them had become governor, there will be no consideration from our people. Like I said before, at that point, we thought it was eternity, because it meant that we will have to wait until 2023. But now 2023 is here with us. And our brothers and sisters in the team are saying, no, it's not yet time. But our predicament right now, our dilemma, is the fact that we don't really have the numbers.
Okay.
Because when you talk about the numbers, people who will vote and all that, our two brothers have just almost 2/3. It means that, like I keep saying sarcastically, they can decide to produce the governorship candidate and produce the deputy governorship candidate and still win the election, because we don't have the number. But again, we are looking up to God and the sensitivity of our three brothers and sisters, that one day they will consider to accede to us their support, so that we can now produce the next governor of Benue State. It's our prayer. But again, we are working on it, because I always believe that at the right time, God will intervene. And I insist that what God cannot do does not really exist. So we are believing that very soon, one day, an Idoma person from Benue South will be the governor of Benue State.
All right, I'm taking a cue from where you just landed. Now, recently, the TIV nation comprising Zone A and B with 14 local government presented a consensus candidate in the person of Honorable Titus Uba against the Idoma consensus. That's in the person of Deputy Governor Engineer Benson Abono from Idoma, with 9 local government areas. How do you still think that the Idoma tribes will be considered by the People's Democratic Party this time?
Well, I think it's not about the People's Democratic Party this time. It's about the voters. It's about the delegates. And so, on the surface of it, if you look at 9 against 14, the Zone C candidate doesn't stand a chance. But politics involves a lot of dynamics. And to win elections, too many factors come into play. And so, if you consider the persons involved, their attitudes, and the perception of the people of them, then you know anything can happen. And that is the nature of politics. That it is not over until it is over. And so for those of us who believe that power should shift, we will continue to advocate, we will continue to make the appeal. And in the People's Democratic Party, we want the best for our party. We want the best for Benue.
Okay.
And so, outside the purely emotional attachment to the long years of neglect, we must also be concerned about the aftermath of elections.
Okay.
Who will be in a better position, in a good position, to deliver on the dividends of democracy to the Benue people? Because as it is now, even as an Idoma person expressing sentiments for power shift, I'm a Benue person, and I want the best for Benue. And so, everybody also should be able to think outside the purely two divides of TIV and Idoma. What are we looking at for in a governor? Those considerations will also be there. And so it is very, very unfortunate that at this last moment, the whole gubernatorial equation has been reduced to Idoma versus TIV, which is a retrogression in terms of the political progress that we have made in our level of unity already. But those are the circumstances in which we find ourselves, and we don't have a choice. You know?
Right.
But quite frankly, I am not a student of Idoma versus the TIV. I am not. I will always advocate and appeal for support. Just like the chief person also is entitled to making appeals across the aisle for support. But I think that if we move away from the purely emotional attachment to certain positions and consider ourselves first and foremost as one people, because I believe it's not by accident that God has put us together. There are many other communities around us that are not in Benue, because God doesn't want it. But God wanted us to be together. Chief and Idoma, Igede, Akwea, Ufia, and all that. God wants us to be together as one. That's why we're one state. The Igala people in Kogi State today were part of Benue State. If God wanted them to be still part of Benue State, they would have still been there. But they are in Kogi State today. We were part of Benue Plateau. And today we are Benue. And so I don't believe that it was by accident that God has put us together. And therefore, we must learn first and foremost to live together as one people in Benue State.
Now, countless times you've talked about how much you want your people to come together, how much your love, you've actually talked and showed your love for your people. Now, based on statistics and research, we've seen that you won your election in all 9 local government areas of Benue South Senatorial District, popularly known as the Zone C. So, and that's like the first in history. Tell us about this feat. Tell us about or how you were able to achieve this feat.
No. Ask him, ask others. I won my election across the 9 local governments with the participation of virtually all political parties. I had the support of virtually all political parties. I was a teacher. I touched many lives. And so people had this attachment to me, somebody who had impacted on the lives of the people. I was chairman and pro-chancellor of 2 federal universities within a space of about 2-3 years. Again, I came across human beings and I assisted them. I did my job of mixing administration with humanity and delivering on the promise of helping people. I'm a strong advocate of egalitarian society because I believe that much of the problem that we have across this country today with ourselves is the problem of inequality and iniquity. I can tell you today that, including myself, that there are many things that we have that we don't need, that the other person needs. It's not supposed to be so. Then I became Minister of Interior. And I continued on that trajectory. Imparted on lives, gave employment to people and the rest of them. And so, when I came out to contest to become senator, it was like everybody, this is payback time. But outside that purely payback time was the consideration that if this man assumes this office, it will be better for us because he will deliver on the promise of helping human beings. And so that is the confidence that they have in me. And that is the reason why I got that overwhelming result. Even from local governments of my opponents, I won election.
Okay.
And I am not taking those votes for granted. I'm not taking that support for granted. I try to tend to the sensibilities of our people. And as much as possible, as God gives me, I will continue to give to my people.
Now, aside touching lives, you, over your 3 years as a senator and a first-timer, feelers from the streets of Idoma clearly shows that the people want you back. So do you think that you have actually done so well, very well, if you have to rate yourself? Do you think that you've done very well for your constituents, for them to be yearning and gunning for you again?
Well, Annabelle, I think this question is better thrown to the people who want me to come back. Okay, I want to come back.
But at least you can rate yourself. Everyone have a way of rating themselves.
Well, I think so far that I've done a few things for our people that they have not seen before. As a first-timer, people will think that I will be reading the lips of other people. I'll be learning the ropes. But I came in here as a teacher, somebody who has been about town. Like they say, I hit the ground running. And so, as I'm talking to you now, I've been able to sponsor 10 bills in the last 3 years. One of the bills is the bill for the establishment of the Federal University of Health Sciences in Utuku, to give it a legal backing. That bill has passed third reading, awaiting transmission to the President for assent. I sponsored 2 bills that have been included in the constitutional amendment that has been transmitted now to the states for consideration of States House of Assembly. One of the bills is the autonomy, financial and administrative for local governments. That was my bill. The second one is the bill for independent candidacy in our electoral process. It's a bill. I sponsored the bill for the establishment of the North Central Development Commission. I sponsored the bill for the welfare of veterans, the families of veterans who died in the course of service to the country. And I moved a lot of motions, on issues that are very, very germane for the good living of the people. Motions that touched on militia attacks in my place, herdsmen attack in our place. You will recall that I moved a motion against the arbitrary deduction of funds for customers' accounts by commercial banks. Only recently, I also drew the attention of the Nigerian people, especially the Nigerian Senate, to the arbitrary increase and hikes in tariffs by pay TV providers. And so I have been around and touching on issues that affect directly the lives of the people, my people, Nigerians. And so I am very convinced that it is in consideration of that I presented myself for a second term in the Senate. And my people literally, overwhelmingly, are clamoring for my return to the Senate because they think that having done this so far in the last how many years, 3 years, I should be able to do more. Because in addition to even the purely legislative duties that I have performed, I have rehabilitated roads, built health centers, rehabilitated schools in our communities. And I think that because that is the attitude that brought me to politics in the first place, if I have the opportunity of funds and position again, I think I will do more. And that is the expectation of the people, and that is the reason why I think they are supporting me to come back.
All right, let's quickly touch on this calls for secession and these agitations that we see in pockets in some parts of the country where you have people calling for one thing or the other. Now, do you think, or do you see any hope, any ray of hope for people from the minority or the minorities in Nigeria to clinch on political leadership in the country?
Yes, why not? You see, it's either we deliberately evolve policies that will create platforms for minorities, for Nigerians, irrespective of social status and tribal status, to assume office. Or, as I say, God will intervene in his own way, because I just told you about the bill that I sponsored for independent candidacy. My initial reaction actually was to sponsor a bill for the rotation of the governorship seats among the 3 senatorial districts in states.
Okay.
But the leadership wasn't very comfortable with it. And so I had to come to the level of independent candidacy. But I'm very convinced that with time, people will become very alive to the sensibilities of minorities. people will become very sensitive to the fact of insecurity occasioned by inequality and unfair treatment. And they will accede to a desire that will make power to rotate among the various communities in Nigeria, between the North and the South.
Okay.
Maybe you know my position already on this present clamor for succession of Buhari. I'm completely sold out on power shifting to the South.
Okay.
Because whether it is APC or it's PDP or SDP that has been in the North for the last 8 years, definitely it is time for power to shift to the South. And I keep insisting that there is nothing extraordinary about who occupies position. If you treat human beings and communities fairly, nobody will clamor for change. Nobody will clamor to come and occupy the seat of power. If I can get what I need, what I expect from a sitting government, it doesn't really matter whether I'm the one there or the other person is there.
All right.
I think it is injustice that is responsible for the incessant clamor for secession and the rest of them. And let me tell you, secession is not the answer to the problem.
All right.
Because I think all of us need to stick together to rescue Nigeria together, to rebuild Nigeria together. What is happening in the former USSR now? Crisis all over the place. Nobody is enjoying the so-called peace they think they have achieved by the dismemberment of the USSR. And so I'm not a student of separation. I'm not a student. Because we are happy here now and talking about problems because we are Nigerians. By the time we split, as you split further, even if you come to the South now, let's assume the South goes its separate way. If it is the minority question, if it is the injustice, the question of injustice and unfair treatment, it will still be there. And so as we continue to disintegrate, as we continue to separate, in our separation, we'll still be faced with the basic problems that we are facing, even in the monolith Nigeria that we're talking about here. So I think that the solution is for us to stick together, challenge ourselves to good governance, and we'll be Nigeria for good.
All right, even as we begin to round up, if as with all of this cause or fight against corruption, now what are your thoughts on the presidential pardon granted to Joshua Dariye and Julie Inyame by President Muhammadu Buhari? What are your thoughts on that?
Me, I think that the pardon is overdue because there are many people out there who have committed more horrendous crimes of corruption and who are walking the streets free and who have even been rewarded with government appointments. We are talking about somebody they say misappropriated 1.6 billion ecological fund. We are talking about somebody who 1 point something. But we're talking about people who have been accused of over 100 billion naira. We're talking about somebody who had upgraded his system with 78 million or billion naira public fund. So if all these people are here working free and being rewarded with government appointments, why will you go and incarcerate somebody, a similar person? So what is good for the goose is good for the gander. This is the unfair treatment, the lopsided prosecution of the war against corruption that Nigerians are complaining about. We're talking about Dariye and Julie Inyame today. But you remember very well that when Rotimi Amaechi left Rivers State, he was accused of a misappropriation of over 100 billion naira. Today, the Minister of Niger Delta Affairs was accused of corruption issues that got to over 100 billion naira. Fashola of Lagos State also had a similar indictment. And so you continue to count them. They're all over the place. So why select a few persons and then you close the chapter? The others have to be rewarded with appointments and walking tall on our streets. I don't think that is a fair treatment. That is my only quarrel with the fight against corruption. Otherwise, corruption is a horrendous crime that must be attacked from all fronts. And believe you me, any government, not this cosmetic attitude towards fighting corruption. Otherwise, any candidate of any political party that chooses to tackle the problem of corruption headlong will have my support, quite frankly, because I think the foundation of Nigeria's underdevelopment is corruption. And as it is now, we don't appear to have any answer, even with Mr. Integrity at the shadow. Look at the criminal stealing of public funds that is going on here. It's not correct. So, quite frankly, I will thank Mr. President for having the courage to set free Jolly Nyame and Dari, because I think they didn't get a fair treatment compared to others who committed more criminal corruption and are walking the streets. Name all of them, you know, all of them.
But pardon me, when you have someone like the Nobel laureate, Professor Wole Soyinka, who stated that their pardon is like squashing poached eggs in the faces of Nigerians. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I don't want to talk about revered literary icons like Wole Soyinka, but I think Wole Soyinka is just being unfair even to himself. Faces on the faces of what Nigerians? We are talking about people who have done worse things that are walking the streets free. Like I said, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. So if you want to jail Darie at the same time that you were trying to prosecute Abla Adamu, who is the national chairman of APC today, why did you withdraw the case? Why did you charge Danjuma Goje to court and withdraw the case? And look at all the persons that have been facing one EFCC case or the other, who have jumped ship from PDP to APC. They have all become angels and are no longer facing prosecution or even investigation. So what are we talking about here? Nigeria belongs to all of us. What is he talking about? You remember I said this here before, and I want to repeat what I said before. When Jonathan was in power, a lot of irresponsible things were happening. And you see the evolution of various organizations, Save Nigeria, Occupy Nigeria, and the rest of them. And as soon as Jonathan left office, and nobody was saying anything again, especially at the face of the EndSARS protests and the rest of them, and nobody was saying anything, what did I say? I said, all of a sudden, Save Nigerian groups have gone to sleep because it is not Jonathan. What do we have today? Even when Nigerians have been confronted with the fact that the president of this country had urged Jonathan to resign on the face of the level of insecurity that we have at that time, to resign because he had proved incapable of handling the security situation in this country. What is happening today, like we all agree now, is worse than what happened during Jonathan's era. Has Buhari resigned? Has anybody asked him to resign? That is the problem that we have, that we are incapable of confronting governments headlong on issues that border on morality and integrity. So I think that we have a problem as a nation, and one day I believe that a Messiah will come and flush all of us that are bad out. And then there will be a new beginning for Nigeria. Quite frankly. That has always been my thought. And all these lily-livered leaders that are masquerading as pretenders to the throne of Nigeria, they should think of either running this country on a very, very robust plane or not going at all. If it is going to government house to perpetrate business as usual, then they shouldn't go there at all.
All right, so new Messiah magic wand, what kind of Nigeria do you envisage after 2023 elections?
In Nigeria that treats all Nigerians fairly and equally. A Nigeria that is egalitarian. A Nigeria that provides for all. My sister, for crying out loud, with all the resources available to us, do you think we have any business with the epilepsy of the electricity situation in this country? With all the resources that we have in this country now, do you think we have any business with some Nigerians not being able to afford a square meal a day? It's not funny. When Nigerians send to you on your telephone to give them just 1,000 naira, sometimes I wonder, is it 1,000 naira to go and buy food or 1,000 naira to go and do incantations to kill me? Because I can't imagine that Nigerians are asking for 1,000 naira or 5,000 naira. How do I go to the bank now to go and send 1,000 naira to somebody? But if you go to our rural areas and some places, you know that that is a reality. That some people can't afford 1,000 naira to even buy garri to drink.
Sure.
With the enormity of the resources that we have, that ends up with only a few persons. Isn't that criminal? And so I think that we must consciously try to evolve in Nigeria and a system of government that works for all Nigerians, not just for a few people. It's not fair. Like I said, many of us have things that we don't need. But there are many Nigerians that are wallowing in abject poverty out there that can't even afford food to eat. That is not a Nigeria of our dream.
All right.
So I think that a Nigeria of our dream is where at least a government that can provide for everybody to be able, you don't have to give food to everybody, but provide the enabling environment for everybody. Give us energy, for instance, so that Nigerians who have capacity can develop some platforms for the employment of Nigerians. Somebody is asking for 1,000 naira today. If you give somebody, say, 200 or 1,000 packs of pure water and sits under a shade and sells the pure water, he will have more than 1,000 naira. If I want to 5,000 naira, he will need to come and beg you for that amount of money again. So when are we going to have that government that provides the enabling environment for Nigerians to engage in productive activities to live their normal lives? That's the kind of government that we're talking about here.
All right. Thank you so much, distinguished Senator Patrick Abba Moro. What a fine place to anchor this conversation. It's been a wonderful time having this talk with you.
Thank you.
All right, viewers, we have been chatting with the distinguished Senator Patrick Abba Moro, and it's been a wonderful time here on The Conversation. I'm sure you must have been rightly entertained, informed, and educated. Stay tuned and keep watching The Conversation, because you never know who my next guest will be. I will definitely see you next time. From the nation's capital, Abuja, I am Annabelle Oji. God bless Nigeria.